All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I want to do a couple of quick introductions for those who don't know me. My name is Curtis Bryan. I'm a field manager for BLM in the Wenatchee field office in Wenatchee, Washington. And Lonnie?
Yeah, good morning. Lonnie Newton, Fire Management Officer for Spokane District, BLM. And that includes the Wenatchee Field Office and also the Border Field Office out of Spokane.
So Lonnie and I are going to talk you through some preseason considerations. I'll apologize. It's mostly talky talk type stuff, but if you have questions, we'll have plenty of time for that, hopefully. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, see that, Lonnie?
Yep, I gotcha.
Okay, so preseason considerations. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, this time of year. So what do you do in the winter when there aren't any fires? I know this is a little bit of a misnomer, seeing as we're contending with some pretty serious and significant wildfires in California and other places. And I know that there's a lot of places around the country where, as Jason alluded to, we're in a true fire year at this point. So I would maybe reframe this to say, what do you do when you have time in between fires, maybe, or fewer fires, I guess? We plan. So this is certainly not a comprehensive list by any stretch of the imagination, but we're going to talk a little bit about, a variety of different plans, your annual operating plans, your fire management plans, etc. These are all the documents that you need in advance of fire season in order to help frame up how you're going to address an emerging incident or an extended incident. So your annual operating plans tend to talk a lot about logistical type stuff, how you're going to work with your interagency partners, how cost shares might work out, those kinds of things. Jason kind of talked us through some of the elements of your fire management plan and how it may tie into your land use plan, whatever that might be. It's forest plan, your resource management plan, etc. These are all documents that give us the information we need in a comprehensive book, if you will, that tells us how we're going to address emerging wildfires moving forward. Delegations, we're going to have delegations to our incident commanders here in Washington. We have what we call the 345 delegation that delegates the authority to all of our type 3, 4, and 5 ICs. And that is an interagency document that is signed by the heads of each of our agencies. So BLM, the Forest Service, the DNR, and that helps us get together, Fish and Wildlife Service, and have uniformity in our shared delegation. On your own respective units, you're going to need to have your duty officers, your FMOs, and your AAs are all going to have to be delegated the authority to fight fire. And that's going to vary depending on your agency. With BLM, typically that agency administrator authority is delegated down to the field manager level, and in some cases down to your assistant field managers. I know in the Forest Service, it's a little bit different. Typically that's delegated to your forest supervisors, and then they may delegate to your district rangers on top of that. So, Lonnie, anything to add here?
Yeah, we're currently working on many of those items right now. Here in Washington, we have a master agreement also. That master agreement typically it does last for 5 years. So we're just coming on to a new 5-year time frame. From those master agreements, you have annual local operating plans. And those, like Curtis mentioned, are very specific down to that local unit and how you're going to all work together within that unit. Very important. Those need to be looked at annually once again. Just like Curtis mentioned, we are engaged with our delegations right now. The 345 delegation for incident commanders is being routed amongst all of our partners and looking at any improvements or necessary things that we need to address into that. And once again, all of those delegations are super important. You'll need to be familiar with those as you enter into preparedness reviews in the spring. And one last thing is on the aviation plans. There's also several aviation plans that you need to be familiar with. There's a national, a state, and a local aviation plan, at least for BLM. So lots of winter work to do there.
Yeah, as I said, this is not a comprehensive list, so would encourage you to get together. If you're an agency administrator, get together with your fire staff, talk through what we need to have in place going into fire season, and vice versa. As fire staff, get with your agency administrator and make sure that we're coordinating on that stuff. All right. Hiring. I know this is a little bit of a touchy subject right now, since a lot of us are dealing with a hiring freeze at the moment, but typically this is the time of year we would be hiring our staff. Those folks, we need to make sure that we have our fire organization pulled together in time for fire season. So hiring engine captains, assistant engine captains, seasonal firefighters, etc., making sure we're bringing those individuals on board, laying out clear leaders' intent for those folks, and letting them know what our expectations are throughout the fire season. There's a lot of training that goes in early on for folks who maybe don't have any fire experience. So we have to make sure we get opportunities to put folks through that and make sure that they are carded in a manner that is appropriate for whatever their job duties are. Talk about work schedules, you can talk about evaluations. All these are things that we want to try to accomplish early. This last bullet, I think, goes without saying, but I'll emphasize it, even though it's in all caps here, is take care of your people. That takes a lot of different forms, right? Your permanent fire staff, many of them are probably still engaged in fire throughout the country. This is an opportunity. Typically, this is the time of year where those folks get their much needed rest and time spent away from the fire line to spend time with family and whatnot. So we want to try to support those folks in that effort. And when you're bringing on new staff, we want to make sure that those folks understand what the job is that we're going to be asking them to do. And that's both from a fire perspective and as an agency administrator perspective. We need to make sure that we provide those folks with clear expectations going into the fire season. Anything else to add on that, Lonnie?
Yeah. Fire season continues to get longer and longer, and it seems like the winter months are shorter and shorter. This year, I know myself and my staff were engaged in fire operations all the way till the first part of November. And then, of course, in light of the California incidents, we're once again back engaged in January. So these items here are critically important for us. You'll oftentimes wonder what your engine captains are doing, and some of your module leaders. They're working on hiring, and it takes a lot of effort. So our organizations have changed over the years, changed for the better, in my opinion. I know on the BLM side, we are striving towards what our agency calls as baseline organization. So standard org for all of our modules and our fire support staff. Forest Service and the other agencies have been doing some similar efforts, and our organizations have changed quite a bit over the last handful of years. So a lot of work, once again, preseason wise, need to be engaged in this, and And that's kind of another objective of Curtis and I both doing this is, we continue that relationship all throughout the year. We work hand in hand, not only in the fire season, but it continues throughout the winter months.
Yeah, integration is key. I'm gonna let Lonnie take this one because he can speak much more intelligently than I can about it.
Yeah, this one, fire danger. So from a preseason standpoint, if you are not familiar with fire danger, you need to engage with your fire staff and start to understand this stuff. It all tiers back to the National Fire Danger Rating System, and there are a lot of outputs that are very valuable and critical for your unit. And now, preseason is the opportunity to look at those and evaluate their effectiveness. This goes back to staffing plans. I know it was mentioned earlier, severity. All that stuff is tiered to your fire danger operating plan. So, in addition to that, I know for BLM, we have a step up plan. And the step up plan has its foundations, of course, in NFDRS. Some of the other agencies have drawdown plans. The amount of resources that are necessary during separate, unique fire danger events throughout the season. So all really interesting. It's rolled into a fire danger operating plan. And I know in our area for Eastern Washington, that's an interagency effort. And we all collaborate amongst the agencies to put that together, that plan, analyze the weather, our fires, and make sure that those indices are going to be appropriate for the fire management workload that we anticipate throughout our strength of force season.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm going to add to this is, make sure you're including your line officers in this discussion. We're going to talk about this in a second, but a lot of this information can help inform us on when we'll start to implement things like fire restriction orders, campfire restrictions in campgrounds and designation around fire rings and those kinds of things. So,
yep. And we have a unit on fire danger here today, later on that we'll obviously go into more detail on it.
We talked about training a little bit. You're going to have brand new folks that have never seen a wildfire before that are going to have to complete their 130, 190. You're going to have refreshers for folks who have been through this but need to tune up. That's an annual requirement every year. We do annual WFDIS refreshers with our line officers and our WFDIS drivers every year. This is a great opportunity for you to build in some local simulations, or I'll call them dry runs, where you can build out essentially a fake fire and WFDIS in the training environment, and it gives you an opportunity to work through those kinks on things like permissions in WFDIS, who can access what are the values or risks for certain areas. This is an opportunity for cross-training with different agencies as well. You may have a lot of partners here in Central Washington. Because of the land pattern that BLM manages in Central Washington, we're scattered all over the state, and it's little parcels here and there. And so everything we do is pretty much in an interagency fashion. So having a good understanding of what our partners are capable of and what they bring to the table and vice versa is critical to success. How many operating agreements do we have, Lonnie? I can't remember.
We have 62 separate reciprocal fire suppression agreements with the fire districts here in Washington. So pretty significant cooperation that we're involved with. We're running right about an average of 100 different incident responses a year when you include in the closest forces incidents that we are dispatched to. We're running right about, I think last year we had about 60 different incidents that involved our jurisdiction. So there's an incredible amount of work there. Takes a lot of coordination with your line officers. I know Curtis and I, as well as the rest of our leadership team, our agency administrators, we're constantly in speed dial and working together. So wrapping it back to training is critically important. The training end of things has changed pretty significantly over the last decade or so. And now is your opportunity, as you prepare for the season, to make sure that you have the task books that you need, that you're getting the trainings that you need. Because in my opinion, there's a shortage, like Jason Loomis talked about. Our incident management teams are going down. Successional planning has been a constant theme for many, many years. And once again, working with your training officers, making sure that you have that development plan for what your aspirations and what your involvement can be in fire. It's a perfect thing to do preseason, and it is mandatory. You'll, as far as preparedness reviews, there's a lot with that need to make sure that all those things are in order.
Yeah, and as Lonnie said, when you deal with that many reciprocal suppression agreements, that you're dealing with everything from full-time paid professional fire departments down to, local volunteer departments that may have very limited staffing and what they can bring to the table. And in a lot of cases, these are going to be folks that are, this is a volunteer gig for them. So the expectation when they show up on a fire is, you can understand that they're not going to be there for the next 2 weeks. They've got jobs that they have to get back to and everything else. So that is something that we want to talk through as a group. I also want to touch bases real briefly on safety plans. As an agency administrator, I think this is one of the things that keeps me up at night a little bit, is making sure I know what it is that we are going to do in the event of a bad outcome on an incident. And so having those plans in place, knowing where they are and what they say, is super important to do before there's smoke in the air. So fire prevention, we talked a little bit about this with Jason and maybe trying to, we've heard some chat about fuels treatments and planning efforts and going into trying to get more implementation on the ground. I think that's going to be absolutely critical moving forward. Prevention plans are everything from education to the public, making sure that they understand what those fire danger ratings are, make sure they understand what the current fire situation is. I encourage all of you to work very closely with your public affairs staff, wherever they are, to make sure that that messaging is in a format that is understandable. I think in a lot of cases, we tend to get kind of jargony in this world. It's really easy to communicate with lots of acronyms and fire speak that most of your average Joe public may or may not understand. And so oftentimes running that through your public affairs team is super important, so that you make sure that the message you're trying to deliver is actually what is going to be received. So I actually appreciate it when I have a public affairs officer who has zero fire experience, so that when they start looking at that stuff, they'll start asking those hard questions like, I don't know what this means. You need to explain this differently so that we can make sure the public understands it. So Lonnie, anything else to add here?
Yeah, That's very well put. Want to emphasize the importance of being familiar and getting acquainted with your public use restrictions and how that process is going to lay out. We're implementing more and more of that, and there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen in order to be prepared to implement public use restrictions. So if you don't, take the opportunity to get that stuff in order, and it's a team effort, right? So need to be prepared and work with the other staff, just like Curtis said, particularly public affairs.
Annual fire meetings. We've talked, you've heard a couple of folks talk about relationships, and if there's one message that I would try to share with everybody, it's that, we say it a lot, but that relationships matter. But what does that really mean? Not only should we have a relationship with our own staff internally between the resources side of things, as well as the fire side of things, line officers and FMOs, those relationships are absolutely critical. You need to have the kind of relationship that you can pick up the phone at midnight, call your FMO or call your agency administrator, and be prepared to have a conversation about some pretty bad fire behavior. And you need to have the kind of relationship to know that when you make that call, the person on the other end of the line is going to be prepared and willing to answer the phone, and you can talk through those challenges together and figure out the solutions. So that's super important internally, but it's also important externally. So when you have your off-season time or in between fires, this is a great opportunity for you to meet with other jurisdictions. As we talked about kind of earlier in our training slides, when we get together with our federal partners, the Forest Service, the BLM, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and some of our state partners, whether that's DNR or ODF, a lot of our qualifications and training is very, very similar, if not identical. A lot of the resources that we have to bring to an incident are in many ways very similar. And in some cases, we rely heavily on some of our partners to bring that to bear. Here in Central Washington, BLM typically staffs 3 engines on the Spokane district. That's for the entire state of Washington. So as you can imagine, when we need support from engines, we'll call in our partners, we'll call in DNR, we're calling the Forest Service, we'll call in Fish and Wildlife Service, etc. So we want to make sure that we're having the conversation with our partners about how we're going to communicate with each other and make sure that we're inclusive in that communication. How are we going to manage jurisdictional boundaries between different jurisdictions within a map? And it's fairly common in Central Washington for you to have 3 or 4 different agencies all with a stake in a particular incident. So having a clear picture of how to communicate leaders' intent to your fire staff and having a unified message for folks is super important. Border fires not only apply to internal jurisdictions, but here in Washington, we have a Canadian border just to the north of us. So every year we coordinate with our counterparts in British Columbia wildfire services. Every other year we get together and have a meeting with federal and state partners and talk about how we're going to manage fires that span the border. This is my 6th year with the Wenatchee field office, and I think we've had border fires between my field office and the Canadian border probably 4 or 5 years out of those 6. So it happens every year. Either we're sending fire to them or they're sending fire to us, one or the other. So having a clear understanding of how we're going to work together to manage that and communicate is really important. Lonnie, anything?
Yeah, get with your fire staff and chat about opportunities to engage with your partners. So it's just critically important. We cannot do this, and we will not do it uniquely here. It takes a team. You know, just to touch on a little bit of our partnerships, just to illustrate the magnitude, like we already mentioned, multiple reciprocal fire suppression agreements. Our particular unit has 420,000 acres of BLM that is once again scattered all throughout the state. We protect by agreement, yet another partnership, the Bureau of Reclamation lands in Eastern Washington. So another 300,000 acres of BOR managed lands. We work with 3 different forests, the Fish and Wildlife Service. We work with 3 tribes, 2 state regions. There's just a lot there, and take those opportunities, engage with your fire staff, and try to go and participate so that when the fire bell does ring, you're recognizing people and they're recognizing you.
Okay, this is just an example, I believe from Eastern Oregon, where, you know, a bunch of agencies got together, state and federal agencies got together, and they kind of laid out some guidance that they're going to follow going into the fire season. So it's just an example of one way to communicate with each other and have kind of a unified operating picture going into the season.
Yep, and I'll put a plug in for once again the master agreement and annual local operating plans. Yeah, if you're not familiar with those, chat with your fire staff, get copies, spend some time, read it, learn about what the intent is for unified command, learn about what you're going to do for closest resources. If there's any protection sharing amongst the agencies, it'll all be spelled out in those documents, and critically important that you engage and learn, know those in the preseason.
It's also a great time to start prepping for for a potential incoming incident management team. I know here in the Spokane district, it's not if, it's when we order an incident management team every year. It's inevitable. So making sure we have our documentation as prepared as possible going into those incidents saves us a lot of time and energy, and allows that team to get to work faster on an incident, so that we're not spinning our wheels chasing information. So what are some of the things that we might want to prep for? Who's going to order the team? Who makes those decisions? How do we engage in that? We're going to talk a little bit more about some of those processes throughout the week. Your delegations of authority. This is different than your delegation of authority that we talked about earlier. Earlier, we talked about delegation to your duty officers, your type 3, 4, 5 incident commanders, to your agency administrators, etc. You'll also need, when you bring in an incident management team, you'll need to sign a delegation of authority authorizing that team and that incident commander authority to fight that fire for you. And that typically needs to be signed by every jurisdiction that is involved in that incident. Typically, you'll have a leader's intent document. We're going to talk more about this as well throughout the week, but basically task, purpose, and end state. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what does success look like? We want to make sure that we deliver that message clearly to our partners and in the incident management team, and make sure that when you have multi-jurisdictional fires, that you have a unified leader's intent message. You don't want to have one agency saying one thing and a different agency saying the opposite. So cost share documents. You can prep a lot of this stuff early and have templates. We have a good template here in Washington that I believe comes out of the master. Is that correct, Lonnie?
It does, yeah.
So the master agreement kind of lays all that out, and that puts all the partners on the same page. We're looking at the same document. We've seen it many times. Turnback standards is another one that typically you can prep ahead of time. Though they don't radically change, but having those documents put together early gives you an opportunity. You might have to tweak it for each incident, but it gives you an opportunity to save some time on the front end there when you're meeting with that team. Lonnie, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're ordering an incident management team to come and help you and alleviate some of the direct incident management associated with that and allow you to focus on other emerging incidents, new initial attack, all that kind of stuff. So just like Curtis mentioned, is prepare this stuff ahead of time, make it so that it isn't a stressor for getting these things together when or if you have to order the incident management team. And also, discuss ahead of time, preseason, understand the jurisdictional responsibilities for who is ordering that incident management team, who is going to be responsible for putting together the in-brief, who is going to be responsible for putting together the delegation of authority. Making sure that all of the appropriate jurisdictions are identified in that delegation of authority. And, once again, don't forget the fire districts too. That's commonly more difficult to wrangle up and oftentimes perhaps forgotten. So make sure to include those fire chiefs when you're doing a delegation of authority.
Just another example here of kind of a checklist that you might keep on hand. If it's useful for you, I'd spend the time to put it together, whether that's an in-briefing agenda, a briefing package for an incident management team, and just having some notes ahead of time to kind of have those brain teasers so that when things start to go sideways, you've got kind of a cheat sheet to work through.
Yeah, I know we prep an in-brief package that includes a variety of different information. You don't want to forget about sharing your radio frequency plan, your aviation plans, your medical plans. There's a lot of associated information that you need to provide to that incident management team to help them be successful and have them help you. So once again, prep that stuff ahead of time, identify it. If you don't know what documents and what things that you need to provide, take this opportunity now to work with your fire staff and get all that stuff together.
Yeah, doesn't have to be perfect, but if it gets you 80% of the information you need going into an incident, that's value added.
Yep. And oftentimes you'll need to be prepared for this relatively quickly, especially with type 3 emerging incidents. Oftentimes you'll perhaps only have a couple hours. You're doing an in-brief for a type 3 team at 2,100 hours. Your incident broke out at 1,500. It is definitely going to behoove you to be organized, have this stuff ready in the preseason so that you can expedite that transition and get some help for that incident.
Eric, I know we're running long, but we can make ourselves available for some questions if folks have them. I see Brian's got a note in here about whether or not the presentation will be available. Yes, we'll make sure it gets onto the portal.
Very good. Any questions for Lonnie or Brian before we move on?
Good morning. I just had a question about, you were talking earlier and about the plans and whatever, and you say we work on the plans, and what kind of help do you have when you work on plans, like any kind of plan, like medical plan, aviation plan, fire management plan? Just a question.
Yeah, good question. I know I can speak for our particular unit is I do engage with all of my fire management staff to help with this planning effort. The aviation manager is helping with the aviation plans. Our fire business person is getting all the cost shares together and working on edits to the annual local operating plan. There's just many staff that are engaged in it, as well as myself and the line officers. So, I'm drafting up and putting together the delegations of authority, sharing that with our leadership team for edits. So it is definitely a group effort.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the plan too. In some cases, there's going to be some plans that are going to require maybe more input from your fire staff, and there's other plans that you may need to engage with your agency administrators a little bit more readily. So,
And do you follow like a template?
Yeah, most of this stuff does have templates. So yeah, if you're not familiar with them, once again, engage with your fire staff and they can show you. There's templates in the red book, there's templates in the master agreement, there's templates that in your agency handbooks. Certainly you're not starting from scratch.
if you don't have a template on your own unit, call your neighbor. They probably got one.
Copy that. Thanks, guys.
You bet.
Yes, thank you very much, you too. Yeah, there's you're going to meet lots of friends in fire, whether it's this class or elsewhere, and we have lots of resources. So when you don't know, ask. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to the scenario here. Let me rearrange some spotlighting. Okay, so I'm going to share. Sorry, I'm having a hard time doing multiple things here at once. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I mentioned earlier today that we have a scenario that goes through the duration of this week. And so this is it. So I'm going to introduce it here. It's just a few slides just talking to you about the general overview of Lightning Ridge fire scenario. And then we're going to go to WFDIS. Brett's going to talk to you about that. And then we're going to actually do the group breakouts to talk about the scenario so that it feels a little awkward here, but this is kind of a change we did this year because I think it'll go a little smoother. So this, okay, hold on. Okay, so the idea here is really to have our kind of lectures that you talk about it, and then you talk about it in your groups, and you also practice doing it, and with that kind of emphasize the same concept several times. So each scenario should really reflect on the things that you've been learning so far today. So preseason considerations just now with Lonnie and Brian, and then Brett's going to be talking to you about wildland fire decision support system immediately after this. All going to be very useful to these discussions. Okay, so I'll show you a map here in a moment, but know that there's a national forest here. It has a really long lake that it's large, has a lot of recreation in the summertime there, as well as some winter recreation as well, but summer is going to be the important one for this scenario. There's a variety of jurisdictions, both federal, including the Forest Service, as well as national park, state, there's some BLM, and private lands as well. So a little bit of everything. And so fire suppression responsibility is Park Service, Forest Service, state, and local fire district. And so that's pretty common where we have mixed jurisdictions, something similar to that. As far as fuel types, so there's timber, kind of a dry ponderosa pine with some true fir, Douglas fir, depending on your elevation. Okay, so here's a map to look at the area. So in the bottom right, you have the biggest community called Drift Smoke. You can see there's a lot more roads down there. You end up with, looks like, some agricultural land across the river. And then as you go to the northwest, you go up in elevations into the mountains. You start having some much higher elevation. It looks like there's even some snow pack still remaining when this aerial photo was taken. So that gives you an idea of kind of that gradient, more backcountry to front country. There's Lightning Lake Resort there, so that you'd expect that that would have a lot of recreational activity there during the summer. Kind of in the south there, there's a community of Preston, the next drainage over from the lake. And further back in kind of that back country, you have Everest. Notice that there's no roads that get back there to the community of Hamilton, Lightning Lake Resort, Everest, or Westville. So from Westville, there you do see some roads up there, but that's just going up past Westville, doesn't connect any other road system. Similar from Butter Landing, there's a dock there. That barges and such can go into, and they can go up the road to the Copper Creek Mine, which is a large remediation site, trying to remediate mining activities that happened long ago. And so that's super fun site. I think that's a good enough overview for right now. There's a lot of fire that occurs back here. So this is just kind of a snapshot to give you an idea of where fires have occurred. So areas that are in yellow have had one fire. Areas in increasing orangeness have had multiple fires. So some of those areas have burned 5 times, and so this would be in the fire history that we know of. So probably about the last 70 years or so. So some of those areas have just burned repeatedly. And so there's a lot of fire. So these communities here have experienced a lot of fire over the last 70 years is really the take home from that, as well as just the impact to the vegetation across the area. Here's some pictures of the area. So you can see in the center there, that's just looking up the lake. Um, Kind of some areas that have a lot of forest have a lot of forest intact still, and some areas that are just burn scars that have just burned several times and don't have a lot left, depending on where you are. There you can see in the bottom right there, there's some flag trees there, probably associated with a planned timber sale. You can see kayaker out on the water, great place for that. Then there's top right there, you can see some docks, some boats there. There's dispersed cabins along the edge that are on private land, and then they're little private in holdings. But then there's also a bunch of Forest Service permitted cabins as well, so that they're on Forest Service land, but the actual cabin itself is private property. So a lot of those, a variety of situations. You can see in the top there, burned over forest, there's snags, brush, etc. Left side, you can see designated campsites too. And so you would expect during the summer that you'd have campers out there, and depending on the fire restrictions you have in place, maybe they can have fires at those in those campfire rings, or maybe not. So the past several years have been very dry. So we have a prolonged drought, and the lowest snowpack on record this winter that we're coming out of right now. We're thinking that right now that we're kind of in late winter, springtime. Um, so I mentioned the large copper mine remediation, multi-million dollars. Lots of people back there working on that. And then, of course, the small communities and individual cabins, and then things like lookout towers, etc. There's the resort is on Forest Service land, is a permitted activity, that sort of thing. Complicated area. So this is where we are in the going into the spring. So you saw a slide like this earlier. I think it was in Loomis's presentation. And so this is from Predictive Services, and this tells you like, do we expect normal wildland fire in an area, higher or less than, and this is for significant fire potential. So everywhere practically in the nation, we have some fire occurrence throughout the during their whatever their fire season is locally, whether that's in the spring or the summer or the fall. And this really compares that to what is expected. And if it's above average, it'll turn it to more red. And if it's below average, it'll be more of a green. And so you can see that by the time we get into summer, for the Northwest, we're expecting above normal significant fire behavior or fire activity, I should say. So in your small groups, after we get through the WFDS discussion, you're gonna go and you're gonna discuss these. I'm gonna paste these into the chat so you'll have these, and this presentation is also sitting up in the learning portal for you to download and refer to this in the slides, which will be how all of the scenario sections will work from here on out. Talk about, as whatever your role is, whether that's agency administrator or FMO, what are you thinking about going into this fire season? What things do you need to have in place before the fire season? And what actions do you need to take to make sure they're in place? For example, if you decide that you think that you need to have some sort of a plan with your cooperating agencies, how are you going to make sure that happens? Okay, so I'll paste that into the chat here, and then this is just some pictures for reference of each of those locations on the map. So that's the end of this. I'm going to stop this, and we're going to turn this over to Brett. If I can. Okay, it's yours, Brett, for WFDS.
All righty. All right, quick check. You can see that? Hear me?
I can't see anything, but I can see you and hear you.
Oh. How about now?
I got it now.
All righty, excellent. All righty. Hello, everyone. Brett Smith here. As you can see there on the introductory screen, my day job's interagency fire planning, which just means from a WFDS standpoint, that means I get to spend quite a bit of time in the year, both during the season, preseason, postseason. WFDS is a pretty common and recurring part of my day job. So, and like most things, the more time you spend at it, the little more familiar that you get with the program and the process. As you heard from previous presentations earlier today, almost everybody has mentioned WFDS at some point in time, and then fully recognizing the diversity of the class and the familiarity with WFDS. There, we plugged in a little 15-minute segment here just to build a foundation of what is WFDS, and we just go through just the basic questions of WFDS. So literally the what, where, when, why, and how. And that's what we're going to talk about over the next 15 minutes. Of course, in 15 minutes, there's no way we can get into the details or the site itself, or how to navigate the site or decision content. So we will not be talking about those things in the next 15 minutes. Just answering those basic questions, making sure we have a common understanding there to work with. Because as you can imagine, particularly after that scenario layout, WFDS is probably going to be a recurring theme throughout the whole week. So what we talk about, okay. We'll start with the what. What is WFDS? As was mentioned just a little bit ago, Wildland Fire Decision Support System is what WFDS stands for, if you haven't seen that before. The sentence there on the top right, it's web-based decision support system, provides a single dynamic documentation system for use at the beginning at the time of discovery of an incident, in this case, wildland fire, and concluding when the fire is declared out. And that one single sentence actually is packed with information there, because they get, well, number one, it's web-based. As long as you have some sort of connection to the internet, you should be able to access WFDS. The program is dynamic in order to meet the needs of dynamic incidents, which you will for sure be dealing with over the course of the week. When do we start thinking about WFDS? It's as soon as the incident is discovered. And how long do we need to continue to involve ourselves with WFDS in the decision support process? And it goes all the way until the fire is declared out. I get asked that a lot, particularly by the agency administrators. How long do I have to deal with this? There's the answer. It is divided up into both production and training. Production is where we actually produce the decisions that are visible to other folks. For the incident, it becomes official record. The training side of things is used for the local training. It is not connected to all of the other different information systems that are out there. And that's what that picture in the bottom right kind of describes. Don't worry about all the different acronyms down there. That's way too much to dive into now. Just know that WFDS is connected to a lot of other fire-related computer systems and interconnected, where decision or information flows multiple directions throughout that web of applications and sites. So when you get into WFDS for the first time and you start looking for an incident, you may be surprised to find that a lot of information is already there, and this is why where a lot of these systems are connected and that information flows freely. So why do we use it? Well, because we're directed to. On the left there, the Interagency Standards for Fire and Fire Aviation Operations, commonly referred to as the Red Book. And if you notice, that one has the 2025 year on it. So yes, the 2025 Red Book is out, electronic only. So check the website for that. But in Chapter 11 of the Red Book, they're under Incident Management and Response. Says WFDS is the decision support documentation platform for all federal wildfires. Pretty straightforward direction there. Note that the Red Book is a standard, so interagency standards. And I had a question a few years back about how standards fit in with policy and procedures for each agency. And so we added a little picture there in the bottom right there. As far as policy and procedures are still the top of the list. And then standards right below that, and then typically guidelines under that. Just know that a lot of agency policy, when it comes to incident management, WFDS, organization structures, whatnot, a lot of those agency policies actually say, see the Red Book. So the standards become the basis for a lot of things that we do here for fire and fire aviation operations, and including WFDS. So that's the why. So where is it? Like I mentioned, web-based. There's a link. This presentation should be available on the portal if it's not already. But the link is in the presentation there. But honestly, if you just do an internet search for WFDS, there's not too many things that use that same acronym, and you can find it. So there on the left, so on the right is just a screenshot of current WFDS, the WFDS Classic. And there's a lot of information there that we can see just from that menu. There's new user access. So if you have never had a WFDS account specifically, that's where you go to get it. You can just go to the WFDS page, new user access, and you can go through there. A page will pop up, you fill out some information, and typically the turnaround is minutes, maybe hours at most. But you can get access to WFDS itself doing that. So if you have troubles getting access, there's phone numbers and a website there to the help desk to help with those things, either new user or if any issues with gaining access to WFDS goes through the help desk there. So as mentioned earlier, WFDS is divided up, has the production and training. Make sure you're in the correct one for whatever you're current working with. Training for different refreshers, or production for working on specific incidents. You can only have one open at a time, meaning you cannot have training open in one window and production in another. When you switch between production and training, it actually logs you out and then you log back in to the other there. So you can't mix those two up. You can only be in one at a time. WFDS Help has a ton of resources available. And again, those are available 24/7. So might add that, I think was mentioned in the preseason considerations there for familiarization with WFDS. A lot of good information there. If you are working on an incident and you need some analysis and decision support, help is available. And that phone number is like a duty officer phone number where you call that phone number and someone will answer and either be able to answer your question or direct you to some folks that may be more local to your area and be able to help with that. And this will be the first mention of WFDS Next Gen. If you haven't heard of WFDS Next Gen, it's coming. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation, but only just a little bit. Just know that it's out there and training resources are already available in anticipation of that switch from WFDS classes to WFDS Next Gen. And so even on the current WFDS page, you can already find information about WFDS Next Gen. So access is now, a few years ago, it was username and password, and the password expired every 60 days, and it was a nuisance for sure. And then it went to just being able to access it through your government ID, and now it is migrated over to FAMOFF is how we access WFDS. And then through FAMOFF, like over here, typically most government or current government employees will still access it through their identification card and eAuth there. But note there is, you can't access it from login.gov, and that's where non-federal employees can go to access through login.gov, establish a profile, and then get access to WFDS that way. And so that would be like our state partners or retired federal employees, folks in the AD program can still go in through login.gov and still be able to access WFDS that way. And then on the right is just a screenshot of FAMOFF when you are accessing there. You can look at the icons there, and you can see that icon there for WFDS Classic. But then you can also see the icon for WFDS Next Gen. If you look at WFDSS, and that NG is the symbol there for WFDS Next Gen. You can see the icons just a little bit different. But so that will be when we make the switch, that'll be how we access both Classic and Next Gen is through FAMOFF. So a little bit on how do we use it, and really what this is about just kind of the parts to the decision or the process there. And this, and again, just a high level overview of it. So it allows the agency administrator, so point the finger at the AAs in the room right now, to describe and assess fire situation, the fire behavior analysis, incident objectives, requirements, course of action, all those different things that you can read there on the screen, which typically involves input from your fire staff or fire FMOs, AFMOs, fire management folks in general. And that's why you're in the room together this whole week, is to talk about these things and what goes into a decision and all these different factors that go into a decision. If you look at the agenda for the entire week and the scenario, it's all to generate discussion on factors and considerations on what goes into a decision related to a specific incident. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. That's what this week is largely about. And then follow through with those decisions into implementation. And then immediately start the cycle of evaluation and adjust as necessary. So again, that dynamic process with this. So these are just some quick screenshots there of some risk assessments, organization assessment in the middle there. A quick look at what some fire behavior analysis may look like. Again, all part of the process and all considerations that go into an incident decision. When do we use it? This is another real common question that I get. And again, this language right here that you can see on the screen is straight out of the Red Book. So this is available to everyone. But typically for an initial decision, there's some subjectivity in that, like whether it escapes initial attack or exceeds initial response. That's just going to be subjective to your local area and the incident itself there. So there's going to be some discussions involved with that. Further down, you can see fire effects are likely to affect more than one agency administrative unit. I think we saw the potential for that in your scenario already, as Eric laid out there. And then at the bottom, significant safety or other concerns are present or anticipated. Is smoke going to be an issue? Is this going to be a long duration incident? I think in the scenario mentioned the major population there was the name of the town was drift smoke, so probably going to be a factor and in your scenario, and so probably going to need a decision with that. So once an initial decision is made, of course, situations are dynamic, they change, and so when do we need to do a new or updated decision? And that's as things change. The course of action is no longer valid. Fire moved beyond the planning area, which is actually somewhat common in a high fire activity season or area. Cost is a factor, absolutely. And there's a lot of discussion on cost later on in this week. So it's for sure a thing that needs to be considered. And management action points will change as the situation changes. So again, WFDS is pretty indicated in a lot of different incidents, both initially and then updates as situations change, which they will. So lots and lots of resources and training for WFDS. On the left, there's the webpage for the Wildland Fire Management Research, Development, and Application, commonly referred to as just the RDNA. So if you hear that later on this week, RDNA, that's what it's referred to. They're the keepers of WFDS. They would keep it alive, but also are working through the process of updating and releasing WFDS Next Gen. So massive task with that. And then all the tools and training that go with it too. And a lot of that is available on the RDNA website there on the left. And then on the right within WFDS itself, again, tons and tons of training material. Definitely, I would put this in the preseason training category. Spend some time, get some familiarity in there. You can download all those PDFs, have them available on a device. Both preseason and then in the time of need using the reference material. Great to have. And then last couple of slides here, I'll just leave you with WFDS Next Gen. Again, this is a screenshot from the current WFDS website there. As you can see, transition from Classic to Next Gen is scheduled for March 26th. So just a couple months from now is the transition from Classic to Next Gen. And again, on the right, you can see the difference in the icons there and kind of what it looks like there on FAMOF. March 26th is what they say for now. And I haven't seen that date change in a while. So far they're sticking to it. A couple of just the screenshots of maybe what Next Gen kind of looks like. These are just screen grabs that I got from the testing environment. So still opportunity for this to change a little bit what it looks and feels, but you can see a lot of map-based involvement here or interaction with WFDS. And so this is just the incident page where you can go to find your incident. As you zoom in and out, your list of incidents on the right will change. That's how you can find your incident. And then once you're in an incident, it's very easy to start a decision. I just wanted to, you can see the red box kind of at the top of the page there. Hopefully that looks at least a little bit familiar from WFDS Classic, meaning that WFDS Next Gen has a very different look and feel to it. But the decision process and the decision content is very much similar or the same as WFDS Classic now. So no major changes with that. all the different parts and pieces of the decision are still there, and then some. There's a lot that they've added to it there. So that's coming. You're just here in a couple of months. And I'd be surprised if there wasn't questions at this point in time. But again, this is gonna, WFTS in general is gonna be a common recurring theme and topic throughout the rest of the week. So feel free to have lots of discussions about that as you move through your scenario. And back to you, Eric.
Thanks, Brett. Okay, so any WFTS questions for Brett before we move on? Okay. Oh.
There was one question in the chat. When should we anticipating using WFTS Next Gen this calendar year? No response needed if it's still working out.
Yeah, he answered it March 26th, I think.
Yep.
Right after I asked.
Okay, thank you much. Okay, so with that, we're going to go to our small groups, and then we're going to go directly to lunch. So it's 56 after right now. So plan will be to be back here at the top of the hour in an hour and 4 minutes, ready for our next lesson. So in that next 64 minutes, you need to address those 3 questions that I put in chat in regards to the scenario, and have a lunch, and then be back and ready to learn. See you at the top of the hour in 64 minutes.